Hello and welcome to a bizarre discussion of killer robots, Battlestar Galactica and various pandemic issues. If we don't get to all of that, we apologise because this is also the fastest growing conservative, evangelical, charismatic Anglican podcast in the entire Fox Chapel area, even in parts of O'Hara as well, I'm led to believe, and Russia. So welcome if you're joining us. Our passage today is from John 20, verse 24. I'm joined as ever by the redoubtable curate, Ben Wulpi. Hello.
Hello, redoubtable.
And some woman that he's sitting too close to as well, Steph Wulpi. Hello.
Hello.
I think this is allowed.
I live with her.
So that's okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. I am really, really pleased that you've joined us. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
If you hear a screech or a crash, there are some children nearby, and that's all part of this corona life. Our passage, please, if you would not mind, madam.
This is in John chapter 20, starting with verse 24. Now Thomas, one of the 12, called the twin, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see in his hands the mark of the nails, and place my finger into the mark of the nails, and place my hand into his side, I will never believe." 8 days later, his disciples were inside again, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands. Put out your hand and place it in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe." Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to him, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed."
Thank you. So, we're speaking to you on Wednesday. This is the passage coming up, so we're a few days ahead as we record these things. I've not yet started preparing this sermon, so this is quite helpful for me. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Happy to do the heavy lifting for you.
What strikes us from this passage?
I'm struck by, Thomas has this reputation as doubting.
Yeah.
Doubting Thomas is the name he's been known by for 2,000 years. I'm struck every time I read this by the lack of doubt in this that I see.
It should be called reserved judgment, Thomas.
Yeah, or steadfastly needing proof and with his own eyes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he's a pragmatic guy. He needs to see it. He needs to feel it. He will not believe unless it's right in front of him. That strikes me less as doubt, as more of a resolute disbelief or unwillingness.
Maybe he's the only person at this point in human history that's actually understood what the resurrection was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And then the only person since is Tom Wright, I believe, is the only other person that's ever understood it.
No comment. But yeah, it strikes me that he's got this impression of, they probably saw a ghost. Or like these guys are going crazy. There's something going on. It couldn't have seen physically Jesus. Because he's wanting these physical, tangible proofs.
Right.
Of hands in his side. And
so presumably that's what they've said to him, is...
Yeah.
We've seen actual Jesus.
Yeah.
And he's like, come off it.
Yeah.
I want to see actual Jesus then.
Yeah, and maybe this is part of John's effort, John the Gospel writer, to ensure that we are believing that this is a physical resurrection. Like, there's no doubts on our end or in reading this that this is a physical, material resurrection of Jesus in his body.
And it says too that the marks are still on his hands as well, and the gash is still in his side. It says, "Place my hand into his side." I don't know how we're exactly supposed to read it. That image, by the way, just viscerally freaks me out. Of like, I don't want to put my hand into your side. That's not...
Yeah, what's the famous painting that portrays that, where Jesus has an actual hole in his... It's like some Renaissance painting. Yeah. And Thomas is literally sticking his finger in this hole. It's gross, and it's like drastic. But I think it's conveying something true in that.
Yeah.
I don't remember the name of the artist, but...
Right.
Yeah. But it's the body that was pierced. It's the body that had a gash cut into the side, and that bears witness. I think another thing I love about the Lord's response to this is, I think it's easy to read this on the one hand as just the Lord rebukes Thomas, but he actually doesn't. I mean, yes, there's the blessed are those who have not seen and yet believed, but the Lord doesn't overlook Thomas's demands. He actually honors them, and that's the first thing he does. He says peace to everybody, and then he turns to Thomas and says, okay, you asked for it, here you go. That's
a good point. So verse 26 says Jesus came and stood among them and said peace be with you. And I don't have the original language in front of me, but I'm guessing it's all of you.
And but he doesn't say, get over it or just have more faith, but he takes Thomas's demand, request, need, whatever it is, and honors it. And says, like, here, you asked for this. This is what you needed.
And he meets him where he is.
Right.
He takes that need and that request, and he meets Thomas there, and shows him himself.
Yeah. In the way that Thomas needs to see it.
Yeah, that's helpful.
The timeline is kind of fun. When you go back to it, you say, so Thomas was not there. So now we know Thomas was not there. I think in the passage before, we know how many are there, but not necessarily who's there. Judas not there. Thomas is not there. I mean, I think about things that I've missed, and it's so annoying when you miss, you're at a party or something and someone does a really good joke and you miss that because, you're off somewhere, and how bad you feel, or there's a really great concert that you always wanted to go to and you missed it or whatever, like how bad that is. I went on a vacation around Europe, and there was a friend who had to stay at work, and we called him every day from the swimming pool and just we would talk to him down snorkels and things, like, and just annoy him, and it was terrible. And he said it was the worst. In fact, actually, he said later on that it was the worst week of his life, and that we'd driven him to the point of depression, and we felt quite bad. But Thomas has missed the resurrected Jesus, and for all he knows, that's it. Well, obviously, did it really happen is a question, but maybe even in his own psyche, he's trying to persuade himself it didn't happen, because if it did, he's just missed this amazing moment. And then it says 8 days later. That's hilarious. That's a long time, isn't it?
It is a long time. When Jesus has died, and then you've seen him resurrected, and then there's all these rumors floating around like he's come back, and then you have to wait 8 days, which I think in biblical terminology is a week, because it's the next Sunday, and because Jewish they didn't have a concept for zero, I think, about then, so it counts the day of and the day after.
Okay,
so I think
that makes sense.
Previously was Easter Sunday, and then this is the next Sunday, is what I've heard some scholars say.
I like this. I like having live scholarship in the building. Is this the another reason for the third day? The counting of Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
That's the other reason. Yeah.
Okay, well, that makes sense. Great, that's helpful. That's really helpful. It's like a daily experience in these Corona times.
Yeah, how about that?
A nugget from Ben, and then you've got this physical experience, which is remarkable. Notice Thomas is with them this time. I wonder if he has duct taped himself to the others. I'm
not going to miss out this time.
Yeah. And but then the doors were locked. So
again.
Yeah.
Maybe they're hoping to see Jesus again, but they're locking the door.
This is really funny.
Yeah.
Maybe they're like, okay, so John was standing here and Peter was wearing blue and the door was locked and it was 72 degrees in this room. We've got to get it right. Because this is what churches do, isn't it? We had this really great spiritual experience in 1973. So we're going to have to make sure we all listen to ABBA before we come to church. Otherwise it won't work.
Try to recreate the experience out of a memory of something God did.
Yeah.
How human is that?
Yeah.
Very.
Yeah.
We do that a lot. I mean, my guess is they're just afraid still.
Yeah.
But that's also human.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you'd think if you've seen the risen Lord, that would alleviate some fear, potentially.
Maybe they had so much fear that half fear is still in a locked room.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they're really in the same place doing the same things that they were doing a week ago. Even though they previously had this amazing experience of Christ appearing to them, saying peace twice, and then breathing on them the Holy Spirit and empowering them, and then commissioning them to go out and do all these wild things. And we know in a few pages' time in Acts they're going to be doing wild things.
Yeah.
But I guess if this is 1 week later, not a lot seems to have changed.
Yeah. And yet in this, I mean, I think this is John the gospel writer's like the culmination of what he wants us to know about Jesus, and what he I mean, the next few verses say, this is why this was written, so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. Like, this is what he's aiming for, that confession of my Lord and my God that Thomas gets to. Like, that's the pinnacle of who Jesus is. It's the pinnacle of recognizing his identity as God. And John is trying to get all of us to that point. You know, all of us who are Thomases, who desire proof, who desire a tangible experience of Jesus, to bring us to the point of saying, my Lord, my God, and confessing that's who Jesus is. I find pretty outstanding.
Do you think there's something there in saying both Lord and God? Is there something going on there that's more than just Lord or God?
Do you have a thought?
Sorry, I'm thinking. It's making me think of another bit where I think I can't remember where it is, but saying that even the demons know who God is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But we only confess that Jesus is Lord by the power of the Holy Spirit. So just knowing who God is, the fact that he is God, the fact that he exists, is actually not enough. And it's not full belonging to God. Like, I can say that God exists and refuse to submit, refuse to receive his love, refuse to love him back, even when I know the fact that that all these things are true.
This is brilliant.
Great. But for Thomas or any of us to say, you are God, but you are also my Lord.
Yeah.
It's like Thomas is all in.
So a kind of an objective statement about who he is, but also a subjective statement of who he is to me.
Yeah.
I mean, so in the Greek, and it might just be Greek, but it actually says the Lord of me and the God of me, and I guess that's just how they wrote. But if you were to say that in English,
that's really interesting.
The God of me, that's really different, right? So folks at home can only hear, but listen to this. That's my branded Christchurch mug. That's my mug, but it's not the mug of me. So I'm using that word possessively. That's my mug. It belongs to me. But the God of me, well, that's different.
Yeah.
I belong to him. I don't know if.
Yeah.
Now I just don't know enough language to know whether that's. I'm reading into Greek syntax something from English that blah blah, or whether it's a really good preaching point. But on top of that, then you're saying Lord and God amplify each other and present different facets of the same thing. Mm-hmm. This is going to be a really great sermon, but I'm going to have to footnote it. Definitely came up with
it. Well, it also reminds me of the beginning of the Gospel of John too. That John is explicit from the very beginning of saying this is who Jesus is, and it's taken the whole rest of the gospel for the people to recognize that. And this is that final recognition. So John starts the gospel was in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Everything was created through him, and all that. He goes on to prove the point that Jesus is God, and he took on flesh. He became incarnated and lived among us, and so we know that from the beginning of John's gospel, but he writes in such a way that the people around Jesus don't know that, but there's this kind of progressive revelation of who he is that culminates here with Thomas.
So this kind of high point.
Yeah, I think so.
Explanation of who God is, who Jesus is. I was reading that some of the cults Jehovah's Witnesses, some of the cults have said, oh, well, what Thomas is doing here is he's basically blaspheming. This is an OMG moment. Only it's not sissy blasphemy like we do. It's full. Yeah. It's at least he's blasphemed properly. But he's just saying, "Oh my God, wow!" And you might not be surprised to hear that I think they're wrong.
That seems like a pretty outlandish way to read something that's pretty direct. Like you're trying to jump through hoops to make the text support what you already believe.
Well, if I'd said, "Oh my God," as a child, my mum would have whacked me with a spoon or something.
Yeah.
And I just can't believe that the actual God would go like, "Well done, Thomas." Effectively, he says here, you know, it's great. You believe. That's wonderful. So Jesus doesn't treat it as a blasphemy.
Yeah.
He treats this. And of course, if it were untrue, you'd expect Jesus to correct him and say, well, don't get ahead of yourself here, Thomas. I'll accept the Lord, but not God.
And he's acknowledging you have now believed.
Yeah.
And so he's saying this is the truth that you've grasped here.
So this is a statement, it's an express statement to Jesus by Thomas, I think you are God. And Jesus saying in response to that, yeah.
Yeah. You said it. You got it right.
Yeah. Right.
And I think there's also there's an invitation there in the blessed are those who have not seen and yet believed. In that, just because I haven't gotten the chance to hold Christ's hand and stick my hand in his side, even though that sounds off-putting to me, that I still have the gift of faith from the Lord, though, that the door is just as open to me as it was to Thomas.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm reading this now in 2020 in the world that we are. I'm here celebrating with Thomas and celebrating that also our God is a God who hears our needs and responds to our needs and gives signs. Our God is a sign-making God. But I don't need that in order to have faith. The door is open to us whether we get a sign or don't get a sign. We don't have to wait until God shows up in the locked room to believe.
Right.
If the Lord gives us that, that's great. If I whipped my head over to the winged back chairs by the fireplace in front of me and Christ was there, I'd be thrilled. But I don't need to wait for that in order to confess my Lord and my God, because blessed are those who have not seen and yet believed. Yeah. I'm glad it ends that way.
Yeah.
Me too. And to flip it on its head, one could imagine a situation where there's a load of people sitting in the room where we are right now, the parlour, Jesus sitting in the leather chair, and some folks not believing.
Yeah.
Coming up with reasons to explain it away.
Yeah. And the end of Matthew, after the resurrection, it says Jesus gathered them all there right before he ascended, and it says some still doubted.
Yeah.
Like, no matter what, even if people see incontrovertible proof, there are going to be people who doubt.
Well, my Old Testament readings recently have been in Exodus and then Numbers, and that is the whole story of a lot of like those. That's one of the story arcs of that section, is that God was literally in front of the people of Israel in the desert in a pillar of fire or a pillar of smoke. If you stepped into the holy place of the tabernacle, you died.
Yeah.
And yet the people still rebelled and still disbelieved. And when Moses was up on top of the mountain with God, who had manifested as a big storm, and they were told not to touch the mountain, what did they do? They made golden calves.
They made a cow.
When like you can see God, and he'd just spoken to them, like they'd actually heard his voice, and yet not believed.
Oh, yeah.
So
and they're so like our children. Like,
yeah,
we just threw in the gold, and out came this cow.
Yeah.
Brackets by itself.
Yeah. So there's something about signs that matter to God. He's a revelatory God, and he uses signs. But it's not just about signs. Like, well, if I see this, then I will believe. Christ speaks into that here and says, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believed."
So, which means we're blessed.
Yeah.
Praise the Lord.
We are. Yeah. that's the place to finish. I can only imagine what it would be like to do a pandemic without a lively faith.
Yeah.
And yet, most people are doing a pandemic without a lively faith. I mean, perhaps this nudges people to ask questions.
Yeah, and I think this idea, this culture we live in, we're seeing is believing, is starting to be ravaged by something we can't see.
Ooh.
And that our systems, our governments, our culture is being ripped down by a virus that cannot be seen. And it's kind of taken some illusions of our culture and ripped them down and knocked them down a few pegs. Because I can't trust in our politics. I can't trust in the market. I can't trust in my comfort or entertainment. What can I trust in?
Yeah.
Blessed are those who have not yet seen and yet have believed, who can confess my Lord and my God to the risen Jesus.
There it is. Wulp. There it is.
How long have you been waiting to say that?
Not the first time in my life I've heard that.
Really? Is it not?
Oh, there are so many jokes about my last name.
Really? And there's no jokes about Shuttleworth?
Not yet. We'll work on that.
There's plenty.
For the next podcast.
There's plenty. Terrible. If you'd seen the things I'd received in the mail, my name has been mangled appallingly, but it's not going to be recorded for the people of God. All right. Thank you very much for listening to all 22 minutes and 3, 4, 5 seconds of this. This has been a podcast of Christ Church, Fox Chapel. God bless. Bye.